Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Innovation X Roundtable from the Sutarja Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology at UC Berkeley. And this month, we are really excited to be joined by our global partner, CKGSB. Can I have Mary and Professor Sidhu give the university introductions for our audience today?
Sure. Thank you so much, Ray. And greetings all, and thank you too.
向各位问好，也感谢各位今天抽时间参与到这次网络研讨会中。我很荣幸能够邀请各位也在这里致辞。那我是 Mary。这个长江商学院呢，其实也是非常重要的一个合作伙伴。非常荣幸能够和长江商学院这一次一起来主办这个研讨会。那同时呢，我们也是和这个 Sutarja 创业与技术商学院和技术中心一起来进行这个项目的合作。我们这个长江商学院呢是在北京、上海和深圳都有校区。等一下张教授会给我们做一个介绍，他就是在深圳的校区，也是我们今天的研讨嘉宾。那我再简单的介绍一下长江商学院。我们是一个中国政府特批的研究生学院，主要是为了培训跨国的领导力人才。我们有非常多的研究项目，包括硕士、博士、DBA 等等。而且我们的教职工呢，都是在领域中领先的研究人员，还有教授。很多人都是在院校，尤其是在美国的院校有终身教职的身份。同时，我们还有一个广大的这个毕业生校友网络。比如说马云，阿里巴巴的马云，他就是我们的校友。还有这个腾讯的陈一丹，其实这个名单呢是非常长的，我就不一一赘述了。但是在这里简单的想强调一下，就是我们这次的研讨会的讨论话题。在长江商学院的这些毕业生当中，一共出现了35个独角兽的企业，而且现在，我们的校友在整个中国还有世界范围内经营着大量的这个企业，还有创新创业的公司。
To be Chief Strategy Officer and is of Alibaba, and another
我们的这个校友呢
Yao left, and he is the Chief
有的
Strategy.
是阿里巴巴的重要的这个首席策略官，还有一些是阿里巴巴的高层领导。这个就是我对于院校一个简单的介绍，再把这个麦克风交给 Ikla。大家好，我是这个伯克利创业与技术中心的创始人，所以这一次呢也是作为联席主办方。
Along with CKGSB, welcome to everybody on the panel. Welcome definitely also to everyone who is attending and watching. Let me say, let's see, I got a couple missions right here. I got a couple goals to get across in this introduction. One is I would like you to understand what Sutarja Center does. And the second one is that how is it or what is it that we're wanting to get from the panel session? In fact, so let me start with that one, and that'll explain why it's important to understand what Sutarja Center does. So definitely lots been changing in the world this year. Like there's been a lot of change, you know, anyway going on in the world. This year has been just a tremendous, 2020 was a tremendous amount of change. And, you know, that change is in like all areas, in health and finance, in the way the global economy works, just all kinds of things that have been changing. And so one thing that we're interested in is what is happening in companies, what's happening in new ventures, what are the different opportunities, just overall, what does this change translate into? And, we've been hosting various Innovation X related roundtables to understand, well, what does that mean for supply chain? What does that mean for the future of news? The future of X. We're trying to understand it from all of these different points of view. And there's two kind of direct benefits that we get from holding the roundtable. One is that in a way, we want to know how we and our students should be engaging in these changes. So in some ways, we like to think of these as like mini advisory board sessions. You've all got, fantastic perspective. You're from different places and can bring that perspective in this conversation. And so, we're looking forward to the topics of cross border issues and what that's going to mean, to our students and how the center overall should be engaging. And that brings me to the last of the purposes of my introduction. In order for you to help us understand how to engage, and like, for example, we're going to use the recorded version of this video also for our students in various classes to get ideas about projects that they're going to be working on. So in order for you to understand how best to kind of advise us, I want to tell you with a slide what happens at Satarja Center, just kind of basically what is going on. And let me see, I'm going to put a slide up right now. And this is like an introduction. Let me put it into full screen mode here. With any luck, you can actually see it. Can you see it? All right, very good. All right, so I only have one slide, and it's this one. And so what is happening at Satarja Center? Again, the purpose is so that your advice on this topic can be the most relevant to the things that we're doing. So what are we doing? We're empowering innovators to positively change the world. Innovators is everybody. It's students, it's executives who are our students. It's all kinds of people that are in our networks. And positively refers to the ethics component. So, you can change the world in a lot of different ways, but kind of what is the right way to change the world? And we've got 4 big categories of things that we're doing. One is that we are teaching students how to have the mindset and behavior to be innovative and entrepreneurial. So a lot of the kind of project experience coursework is to stretch them in those ways, in basically in the mindset and behavioral aspects. It's almost like developing people as opposed to the project itself. A second category of things that we're doing at Berkeley here is that we're doing innovation labs. And we have these labs, very practical versions in data, blockchain, plant-based meat, ways to deplastify the planet, future of work. There's all of these topics. And with these lab topics, we're looking for the things that we learn in these roundtables to be the basis or the beginning of a lot of different projects that happen. And our projects can be very technical, on the data blockchain side, and they can also bridge into the industry stories of, how the world effectively is adapting. A third category is global engagement. CKGSB is one and a very important partner of ours. And there are other partners around the world, and many partners send students to our campus. That is when people can travel, when it's easier to do that. And many times professors are coming to see how we teach and to collaborate with us. And the last of the 4 categories I have to tell you is that we have a program called Engineering Leadership Professional Program. And this has people from Apple, Google, Yahoo, Network Appliances, Samsung, Cisco. This is kind of our flagship of our executive and professional, like for people who've graduated, if you will. It's for tech firm leaders who are rising, and an MBA is too much time for them. The 1-week programs are just not enough. And so this kind of middle category of people who want to stay in engineering, but have those broader skills, maybe some of the same types that are taught in CKGSB, are learned in this category here in ELPP and our other executive programs. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop the slide share. Like I said, the main reason there is because you're going to talk a lot about cross-border opportunities. Think about what our students can be doing. That's our goal here, and we're looking forward to the panel. I'm going to be handing it back to Ray, I believe. So Ray, it's all yours.
That's right. Thank you so much for the very detailed introduction. I'll do a self-introduction first, and then I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves before we go into a fireside chat. So my name is Ray, and I am actually an alumna of UC Berkeley. I graduated in 2004 with an engineering degree, and unfortunately, it was right before the Sutardja Center was founded, so I missed out on all of this goodness. But I'm really excited to be reconnected with the Cal community. I personally worked in finance, so investment banking, private equity, and VC in both Silicon Valley and China. So I'm really excited to be here and learn from all of the panelists on today's topic, which is U.S. innovation and cross-border opportunity. We'll actually be doing more, I believe, another event in March going the other way on Chinese innovation. I personally run right now a media platform called TechBuzz China, where I talk about interesting trends from China. So like I said, I'm really interested in hearing what the panelists have to say today because it's on the U.S. Where I live right now. If I can have Lee, go next and introduce yourself. That would be great.
Oh, of course, for sure. Thanks, Ray. Hi, everyone. My name is Li Song, 中文叫宋丽. I'm a managing director at Silicon Valley Bank's Asia Link practice, where I have been a tech banker for 20 years. So Silicon Valley Bank, where SVB, as many of you know, is certainly a world kind of famous or recognized technology bank. What we do is that we specialized in technology, life science, VC, and PE banking. So that's the core of our client. And majority of our clients are corporate clients. Some of them are at the forefront of the pandemic fighting and also improving people's life during the pandemic process. For example, one of the leading vaccine makers in the whole world is our client. One of the well-known food delivery or app-based food delivery company here in the US is our bank, is our client as well. So that's, I mean, our clients using their technology to improve people's life or kind of help people to deal with the pandemic, etc. My team, Asia Link, is serving as a bridge to bring technology life science companies from the US to China and vice versa. Very happy to be on the panel. Look forward to the discussion.
Michael?
All right, thanks Ray for the great intro. And first of all, I'm really extremely, delighted and honored to be here with some amazing panelists and professors. And I'm truly humbled to share some of the knowledge and insights as well as some of the experience that I had before in New York City building the cross-border innovation investment vehicles. And then thanks to KGSB and then Berkeley for providing such a great platform because this is all about educating, all about sharing. So a little bit background from myself. I run Acton Capital, which is a single family office for my own family business, which is a conglomerate, entertainment and culture industry conglomerate in China, where my father founded a business about 3 decades ago. And then we're here in New York, not only SIC and investing in emerging fund managers, but also we do direct investments into startups. And beyond that, we also help those startups to go cross-border to expand and scale up in China market. So in that regard, we're also a venture studio and a venture builder. So that's just a little bit of myself. Thank you.
Sure, Olivia.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you so much to Berkeley and CKGSB for hosting this event. I'm also very excited. My name is Olivia. I founded and run a seed stage focused fund called Olive Capital based in Silicon Valley. We invest in both software enabled biology and tech. Previously, I ran the cross-border investments for Gen Fund for over 6 years and founded our US office for Gen Fund in 2016, where I led investments in over 40 companies, co-investing alongside tier one funds in many sectors. We've thought a lot about aging and global demographic trends, like therapeutics and healthcare, as well as innovation systems where US and China can learn from each other. So I've also invested in companies like Substack, where areas in which China is ahead can inform and make better decisions for the US.
Yeah, we'll be sure to ask you more about that. Could I have Professor Zhang also introduce himself?
Yeah, good morning and good evening. This is Weining Zhang from the CKGSB, 中文名张维宁. And I'm the professor in the CKGSB, and I'm also academic director for the CK Entrepreneur Camp. In Chinese, it is called Chuang Chuang Community. So from 2015, every year we recruit more than 300 startup companies, all the traditional companies which would like to transform digitally to our entrepreneur.
转型，我们都鼓励他们加入我们的创创社区。
Some of our alumni are pretty good.
我们有一些校友是非常棒的，比如说拼多多，就是我们的学员，
VIP Kid,
还有 VIP Kid。
We have maybe 20 to 30 companies got listed in the US or in China or in Hong Kong. So and myself, I'm also advisors for some companies from the small, like the startup to the huge company like Alibaba. So it's very great opportunity to share some of my knowledge or experience with you.
Thank you. And finally, Professor Sidhu, I know you introduced the Sutarja Center, but did you want to talk a little bit about your own background?
Okay, hi, you just hit my most unfavorite topic, but if you like, I'm happy to do that. So all my degrees are in electrical engineering through my PhD. I spent about half my career in industry. I have about 75 patents in mostly internet communication types of technologies. I was inventor of the year for 3Com Corporation in 1999. And the IEEE Major Innovation Award for 2018. I've been at Berkeley since 2005. And so I'm like a mixed, like hybrid kind of industry and academic combination, okay?
Thanks. So I just missed you because I did EE at Cal. Anyway, I think we have taken a lot of time just giving introductions, but that gives you the audience hopefully a really good background into the wide diversity of experience that this panel brings. And I'd like to jump right into questions. So we had a long debriefing session. I think I'm happy to say that we have a lot of questions prepared that hopefully will highlight some of the most pressing things you want to know about US innovation. So let's first start with Michael. As you guys all heard, Michael is working on a cross-border accelerator and has his own family office where they're investing into both funds and startups. But in the process of getting to know Michael's thoughts on US innovation, he mentioned something I think is really interesting, and I think that a lot of people probably don't know too much about in China, and that's the concept of impact investing and ESG investing. There happens to be a lot of innovation here in the US and I think also in Europe. Could you, Michael, explain a little bit more about what you're seeing here and especially hit on learnings that maybe our Chinese audience would be find most relevant?
For sure. So I like to take a step back, talking a little bit about our business and also the positioning we have in the US as well as across border. I come from a family business that in a traditional conglomerate in an entertainment business. So we do movie theaters and we do art schools. We collect antiques from all over the world. And then over the years, we have a much more responsibility that actually are thinking of contributing back to the society. And also, I think in general, we diversifying our portfolios and investing into venture capital funds because I think that's sort of one way that we can transform our business into next level, not traditional run, but also more digitally transformation. So that's what we spend on most of the times on investing and diversifying investments into a multiple different fund strategy as well as direct investments into the startups. So far, we have some of the prod records that we back up with some of top tier venture capital funds in the China market as well as in the US, and we just had amazing record last year. Some of the portfolio companies went IPO, which is super high last year in terms of a capital market. In terms of Ray, you mentioned is ESG and the impact investing. I think that's really hot topic right now. And I think all we call it sustainable and impact investing, the umbrella of a sustainable and responsible investing include both ESG approaches and the impact investing actually, which very much differ from traditional investing, where decisions are made based on the returns and the risk objectives. But moreover, right now, I think investors are evaluating the opportunities and more on the three-dimensional perspective rather than just a two traditional perspective. So we also hear risk-adjusted returns, but moreover, furthermore in the future, we probably will hear more on impact-adjusted returns. And we hear a sharp ratio to really evaluate the opportunities and also the risk. And then we see a lot more opportunities coming from the impact perspective. And I think that moreover, I think the Sustainable Impact Investment Fund still encounter a lot of doubts from peers and other family offices and investors about sacrificing returns for such. But it actually, in fact, from the data perspective, the ESG fund had outperformed other funds over the last 2 years, if you look at the current public market. But basically speaking, there's an increasing understanding in society that we need to care about climate. We need to care about condition of the employees and understanding based on the academic research that if you integrate ESG factors, you can generate high returns and a higher performance and lower the risk. Some of the really, some of the data I would love to take a chance to really share with our peers and the audience here. So the share of global investors that applied ESG criteria to at least a quarter of their total investments jumped from 48% in 2017, to 70% in 2019. In the US, professional investors are expected to expand their holding of ESG assets from 12 trillion USD from 2018 to 35 trillion USD by 2025, or 50% of their total investments, since the number are pretty much from pre-COVID. I'm pretty sure that COVID only further accelerated this trend. And then we also hear climate change, ESG data analysis. The way we took a look at future innovation in terms of responsible investing, I think ESG data technology, environmental friendly food sources, as well as renewable energy, and including circular economy, also our target. So we're honestly speaking, we're talking to a few really top tier ESG fund managers, emerging fund managers right now, starting a ESG fund in China, particularly targeting this issue. I think the US and we're talking about US innovation. I think the US, particularly this ESG and impact, the US and Europe is leading this particular field. And then there are a lot of rooms that potentially China can catch up in terms of cross-border business and cross-border opportunity for investment purpose. There are a lot of wealth transfer from the first generation to the third and to the second as well. They more care about sustainable investing. They more care about climate change. They more care about those impacts that a company can generate it. I think that's where a lot of not only small business, but also the large business, large corporates that even went IPO, need to take a social responsibility to be able to generate the future wealth and also the impacts over there. So I love to stop there. I come from a general perspective from not only particular technology where we're thinking of investing in that particular field, but also I think this is a big trend that a lot of US and Europe leading this particular field, and China has a lot of potential to catch up.
Thank you for that, Michael. Really excited to hear that more and more funds. So I didn't realize quite so many investors are focused on ESG. As someone living in California right now, experiencing wildfire threats and horrible storms basically every other week. I am really happy to hear that. And I think this segues really well into Olivia, right? So as you said in your self-intro, you focus on early stage technologies, but biology happens to be one of the sectors you have done a lot of work on. And biotech actually has a lot of overlap with, I think, ESG, right? We had mentioned, or you had mentioned on the call that some of the investments you had been looking at include like alternative proteins. So besides alternative proteins, or maybe you can give us some examples of companies that are really interesting. What are some of the other cool biotech opportunities that Chinese investors could take a look at more seriously?
Sure. Just given my training first at Credit Suisse, then at Zhenge, as many of you may know, Zhenge, we talk about really investing in founders and following people who are quitting their jobs and starting companies and seeing where do they go. So very bottoms up. And from 2013 and 14, I started to invest at this intersection. And what we have discovered is that there are a lot of founders that may not have had biotech backgrounds, partnering with founders and scientists with deep domain expertises in biology to think about bringing engineering principles to biological problems and accelerating research and innovation. So what do I mean? For example, one company that I've worked with at Olive Capital and at Gen Fund is started by the former SpaceX engineering lead and SpaceX industrial design lead. And they're working with the Berkeley professor, Jennifer Doudna, this year, recipient of the Nobel Prize, to bring SpaceX grade manufacturing to RNA manufacturing and synthetic materials and engineering kits and functional assays. And so they're doing, tens of millions in revenue and, becoming the foundational framework of therapeutics and diagnostics for CRISPR. And I think of two things when I think about, this theme of what does biology mean in the relation of impact investing or climate change. And I'm sure many of you have heard the phrase, bio is eating the world by Andreessen Horowitz. And I think of two phrases because this is such a big topic. The first is, biology is eating the world. And the second is engineering is also eating biology. So we're very excited to see some of the best founders that have started companies in tech and have sold them or led them public, working with the best scientists to bring drug discovery to the market faster, to bring automation for creating synthetic biological materials faster. That's been amazing. And the other thing is seeing biological processes bring greater value into the world. So everyone knows about Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, and that has been just, very popular in the press. But I think there are smaller companies that are more up and coming that deserve more attention. For example, there are companies like Solugen, and this wave of companies that use fermentation processes and organic materials to make hydrogen peroxide, industrial materials. And Jay Kiesling, who is another Berkeley professor, has done so much in terms of thinking about better organic, holistic biological processes to create materials that we need at industrial scale today. I'll stop there. Obviously, in the biology space, we've looked a lot at longevity. We've looked at a lot of biomarker data, from metabolic health and glucose to, diabetes reversal and sleep tracking. There's been just so much innovation this year on data and sensor technology that is, capturing our data so we can have more power and control on how our our health is monitored and how we can live longer.
Thanks. Yeah. I think, especially with COVID, I think health is really on top of everyone's minds. I wanted to leave some opportunity here for Professors Zhang and Sidu, if you guys are seeing any opportunities in your respective universities that or entrepreneurs that are taking advantage of these opportunities that we're talking about.
Yeah. In China, I think there is a huge change in the next 5 or 10 years. So I think the innovations, if anyone would like to just innovate in China, so we have to know better about the bigger trend of the Chinese market. So I think at least 4 things we should keep in mind about the change in the next 5 or 10 years. First one is the upgrade of the Chinese infrastructure will be totally accelerated. So previously, the most important infrastructure may be the transportation, okay, so the electricity, power, so all of this. But maybe in the future, not in the future, actually it's now. So we will focus on the 3 layers of infrastructure. The bottom layer is the terminals. We need more and more smart terminals. So not only for the smart product, but also the biotech. If we think biotech is also a terminal for the society, the education is a terminal for the society. And all of this terminal would be rebuilt. And the middle level, in the middle layer is the network. So we need new network to communicate people. So maybe in the last 20 years, we spent a lot of time to talk about the social community. So that's the network for a human being. But we will need more network for the whole society, including the human being and things. So IoT-based network will be rebuilt in China in the future. So the top layer is about the cloud. All we can think is a platform, so everybody can get the power from the platform. So the huge companies like Alibaba, Huawei, Tencent, all of these companies would like to build this top infrastructure. So all of these 3 layers would be very important in the next 5 or 10 years. So the second thing is change of the consumption of the young people. So my generation is old already. So in China, we always think, okay, maybe 5 years we will count it as 1 generation. So we will need more new fashions. We will need more new brands, and more young people like the tech things as the brand. So for example, Apple is a very good example. So Apple is not only a digital product, actually it is a fashion. So how to develop the technology into a fashion is very important for the future market in China. And next thing, so I think Xiaomi is working better and better now. It's not perfect, but it's working better and better now. And Huawei, it's a pretty good example as well. So, and the third thing is the shift from service to manufacturing. And this is very important for the whole industry. So for the whole country, the central government of China just published the new strategies for the whole country in the next 5 years. So one very important point is we will shift our focus from the service development to manufacturing development. So we will need more smart factory. We will need more technologies to offset the increasing cost. So previously our advantage is the mass production, and later our advantage becomes the product. So the R&D, the research and development based, or R&D driven to product design. But in the next 5 or 10 years, maybe the fundamental research will be more and more important. So that's why more and more Chinese companies, especially the huge company, and from the small to the huge company actually, would like to link with the top university in US or in Europe. So we need to get more very fundamental idea and very fundamental technology to develop the new product. So in the fourth, it's very important just during the pandemic. So the world may need more production capacity from China. Now, this is what we observe. But we need more capacities, production capacities. So new technology can better just improve this kind of things. So basically, I just think, you know, many industries in China should be rebuilt. So for example, iPhone just invented the phone, Tesla just invented the cars. So I think these examples can be extended for a long list. So for example, I just advised two companies, two of my students. One is doing the home appliance. So from the refrigerator, TV set, and everything of this. So basically, I think this home digital consumption product industry will be completely transformed in the next 5 or 10 years. Just if there is a breakthrough in the voice recognition and the MPL, so everything will be changed. So we don't need our current refrigerator anymore. We just need a new refrigerator who can tell me everything and I can communicate. So for example, another example is a gas-powered electricity generator. It's a very huge market. So the most important brand is Honda. But you know, this market, I think, will be completely replaced by the batteries in the future. So because it's safe, okay, it's more green, you know, a lot of things, a lot of benefit would be over there. So I think a lot of industries, at least in China, would be rebuilt. So this would be a huge market. Okay, if you have any good idea, so please join this competition. Okay.
That was a very persuasive speech for people to start companies. I don't know if Professor Sita, you had anything to add in response to either what Professor Zhang said or what Olivia and Michael had said. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I think there's already been a lot of really good answers here. So just to maybe recap a little bit, on the bio side, a lot of those things already were coming up, you know, the CRISPR technologies, what Jay Kiesling's been doing with algae and with yeast for, you know, production, you know, the bio kind of side. For me, I actually work more on data and AI, is like more systems types of things. One thing I will say is, you know, we've just been through, and we're not completely out of it, this whole COVID situation. And the world has really seen like this digital divide like we've never had before, and a digital acceleration like we haven't seen before. In fact, you know, like it's not true that the whole, you know, everyone's economy has suffered. A lot of people's economy has suffered, you know, airline travel has been hit, hotels. But if you look at Amazon in US, Netflix, NVIDIA, everyone who's basically creating the digital infrastructure, they're actually doing like better than ever. You know, like that whole world of the digital infrastructure has been like far accelerated. And in some ways, it's almost surprising that the world hasn't been hit harder with, you know, what has happened in the last year. The fact that an economy is still working in some way, even though people are not going out the way that they were going out before, talks really about like how much of that shift has happened. And I think a lot of change is still being figured out because of this digital acceleration, meaning one, there's a lot of pent up demand for people who'd like to do the things that they weren't able to do before. But you know, like as soon as everyone can fly, you're not going to be able to get a ticket. You know, like it's going to be hard, like, you know, make use of like all the stuff out there. So like something's going to happen there, and then the you know, like literally everyone figured out how to do things differently than they did before. So there's a difference in future of education. There's a difference in like just how news works, how people future work, like all these topics of like all industry by industry, they've all been adjusting. And you know, there's winners and losers, and the ones that were kind of digitally oriented are winning. They're kind of redefining what those industries are like. I don't know if that's exactly the answer you're looking for, but there's a big change, you know, that we're going through, and it has to have a lot of impact in what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I know that here in Silicon Valley, everyone had been preparing for a very slow year of 2020, and exactly the opposite happened. And it happened to be like one of the best years for entrepreneurs and investors alike. Everyone was super busy. I'd like to give Lee some opportunity to talk about, you know, on the debriefing call, because of you have this very unique position where SCB is such a dominant service provider to basically the entire innovation ecosystem. And you also are a banker yourself, so you have a great insight into fintech industry. So I don't know if you wanted to talk about some of the innovations that you see here in the US on the fintech side, and also maybe more broadly, what are the hottest sectors that which sectors that your clients are in are doing the best, without maybe revealing any confidential information, but like what are people really rocking at right now?
Of course, yeah. I mean, the several sectors or field the previous panelists talked about, they're all kind of hard, tangible science over there, no doubt about that. But the financial sector, fintech or traditional financial sector, they are intangible service to the whole economy. So what the purpose of that is to help the economy, help the players in the economy to do things better, faster, and more efficient. So that's the key. This is like the engine oil for your engine to run the car better. So this is the key part of it. I mean, as a banker for more than 20 years, I paid a lot of attention to the fintech sector, as you mentioned that. This is really the early stage of the explosive growth of fintech sector. There are so many different subsectors within fintech, but in my opinion, from my observation, there will be winners and losers. If the companies or fintech companies are competing with traditional banks and insurance companies in the same field, it's hard to get ahead because of the stiff regulation from the state, from the federal government, from the local government. Is very, very cumbersome. And also the cost of capital for those newcomers are much higher, because if you're a bank, the deposit that's your capital. The cost of that is almost nothing now. But if you're a startup company, you want to do lending, you have to raise money from your VC or other banks. It's very expensive, that. So competing with traditional banks or insurance company, it's tough field. But if you're a niche market player, or if your products are complementing the existing players, that's a good field. In terms of the niche market, I give you one example. There's a company called Affirm, AFFIRM. It's a consumer financing company. So when you buy something online, let's say you buy a $100 power drill or a $500 dress, when you check out, there's an option that says Affirm will finance you for the whole transaction in 4 installment payment, interest-free. This whole thing where financing used to be done by banks in each and every retailers, but now because everything is happening online or on their apps, so Affirm can just use their app and then contract or align with all the different e-commerce players and then do it that way. So it's much more efficient. So this is the niche player I mentioned. The other one is the kind of the complementary to the existing players. So if you have some type of a killer app technology to help infrastructure, to help the flow of the existing financial services providers, you can do very well. I'll give you one example. Stock trading is an extremely hot topic nowadays in the US, right? But when you trade a stock, someone has to check whether the order is correct or not, whether the symbol you put in is correct, the amount you want to buy is correct, and also whether it's good today or good for a long period of time, that order price. So someone has to check that. In the past, that's checked by human. And then computer files kind of comparing to each other, that's in the past. And there are companies that they created artificial intelligence technology. They can check all those several thousand orders within a nanosecond. I mean, today, GameStop stock traded 105 million shares. And all those shares got processed almost like seamlessly with that new technology. So those are the things I want to just point out. To summarize, it's hard to compete with the existing financial service providers, but if you can complement them or focus on niche sector, that'll be great. In terms of China, when you mentioned, in my opinion, the financial services sector in China will experience a huge boom. The reason for that is, even though the mobile payment in China is so advanced in the whole world, but the broader financial services sector and its technology is still pretty much lagging behind. So, I mean, with the trade war going on, with the trade war first phase deal, China significantly opened its financial services sector to the outside world. I think it'll be a great field for tech firms and other providers to come in and grab that market share in China.
Yeah, I know today fintech is really hot, and it seems like even aside from the opportunities you talked about when it comes to stock trading, it's like every company could potentially be involved. Even if you're just a social media community like Reddit, you could be really become almost like a fintech business because of the interest right now in the capital markets. And I think that is pretty much global. I think actually we do have a few Q&A from the audience, and it kind of overlaps actually with some of the prepared questions we had. So why don't I just go straight to the Q&A? And I think one of the first questions, we discussed this all in the panel, and the question is, what's the impact to Silicon Valley on the Chinese VCs drawing back, right? So because of the tensions and some capital being pulled out, are there other opportunities that other opportunities that Chinese investors can directly participate in? And I kind of wanted to roll it up into a question I had originally planned for Olivia. So maybe Olivia, you can go first and the rest of the panelists can jump in. But you had talked briefly about how there is actually innovation happening in the US on the fund side itself, right? So not just like the companies that people are creating, but how we invest. And does that create an opportunity perhaps for Chinese investors to get involved?
Yeah, what an interesting question. I think, I have to be a little careful in terms of commenting on the broader US-China environment. There are powers greater that be, and, it's very hard to tell the future. I am very lucky to have grown up in the US and in China. So I think when everything happened, I created, a fully US fund with US LPs to continue to bring a unique cross-border voice. And so I'll just talk about US innovation. I think if that's okay, I apologize. I don't have too much to comment.
Yeah. On the fund side, like because you had said on the call that the rolling funds, angel lists, all these things, do they perhaps so maybe you can just talk about the innovation, and then maybe we just don't know that's an appropriate opportunity for Chinese investors, but I think it'd be great if they could be aware of some of these things. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say this. I think the LP community, I think China had a very important role in the Silicon Valley ecosystem, and especially because a lot of China money money originating abroad really loved US frontier tech because, you know, US academia, US intellectual kind of rigor is leading. And so when a lot of the things happened in the geopolitical landscape the last few years, I think when I talk to US fund LPs, they want to fill in the gaps with like US capital or other capital to really invest in the frontier tech ecosystem for AI, ML, quantum computing, biology. A lot of that was a lot of Chinese money. And when that separated and when that decoupled, I think there was a rush to fill that gap. And I've also been in a lot of conversations about, you know, frontier technology seed investor ecosystems and how that's emerged. And you also see frontier funds like Data Collective and Lux Capital. And now there are more that have raised a lot during COVID, spinoffs from, you know, from like kind of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, et cetera, et cetera. I think US has had to like really push itself in building that environment for funding to back innovation in America. And then on the financing innovation side, it's been a very interesting time to be a first-time emerging manager, you know, raising money by Fund One off of Zoom through COVID. I think I'll talk about two things. Number one is having invested in both China and the US, having co-invested with tier one funds in China, tier one funds in the US, it's like a flipped environment. So in China, I feel that the barrier to entry for seed is much higher. It's harder to start like a great seed fund. Whereas in America, I would say YC and a few others have really owned the accelerator and incubator space, but there are literally hundreds of new seed funds being formed every year. And this year, a lot of, you know, operators and founders have started their own funds. And there's been a great tradition of that. Like the Reddit co-founder Alexis had co-founded, you know, Initialized. And this year, the Superhuman founders have their own fund. The founder of Scale.ai has her own fund. And so you see a lot of new funds that are small, the nano funds that have great returns, started by these cult, you know, individuals. And that's just accelerated. And then because of the proliferation of these new small nano funds, I would say there's more training and better tools that bleed into enterprise. So there is now like the Y Combinator of seed funds, where as a seed manager, just like a founder, you apply to a program and you have classes on how to be a good seed manager. Many large funds and fund of funds, you know, third-party programs are starting to build this infrastructure for angel investing and seed investing education. I think that really started in 2020. I feel like it just started overnight. And I think like the proliferation of Slack groups for GPs and education amongst kind of underground Slack groups. So the know-how is suddenly kind of like prolific. And then you mentioned the AngelList rolling funds. You know, before with the venture fund, you have an 18-month, maybe 24 at most fundraising timeline for each fund. You know, it's private vehicle, 10 to 15 year timeline. Now, AngelList has become, you know, AngelList often will compete with like Gunderson or Cooley to do your fund formation, which is really crazy, honestly, to me. And they have created new structures, given that they're already embedded in the fund formation legal stack, to structure venture funds like hedge funds, where you can kind of raise indefinitely at different terms. So that's been very interesting. I do feel that like a lot of public stage macro always trickles down to seed, and everything is so interrelated. I started off my career at Credit Suisse, you know, being the broker for Coatue and SAC and Soros, and I've stayed friends with these hedge fund managers for the last decade, and they're all now co-investing with me at the seed stage. So, private and public have become very strong. There's so much consolidation with the top funds. There's so much collaboration because there's so much money to be made, right? From growth to IPO. And I think given that, and given still this tension between Wall Street and Silicon Valley, that also pushes innovation for new financial instruments like SPACs and new ways in which, founders want to understand and own their path of going public. There's just so much to say. I try to, kind of bring everything back to a few principles because we could write a book about everything that's happened. Last thing I'll say is I love being a fund manager during this time because I love what I can do with data and organization. Like Notion raised at a $2 billion valuation. For those who you don't know, for those who might not know, Notion it's hard to explain. It's like a productivity tool that's like all of Google Suite in one. Airtable, and now because there's COVID, I am networking on Clubhouse, and I'm in Clubhouse talking to people and meeting new people. So from audio-based social networking to do my new venture deal sourcing and networking to building my stack with Substack and Notion and Airtable, it's just been really dramatically different from the past, and also so much more content and information on how I can do the best with my fund structure.
Thank you for that. I noticed that we're actually at the hour mark, so I understand some of the audience may have to go. If so, thank you for joining us. But for those of you who can't stay for just 5-10 more minutes, we do have one other question from the audience that I think would be of great interest. And I think, this person wanted Professor Zhang to answer it, but I actually also think Michael would be a great position to answer it. And the question is, given everything, the state of the world today, what is the opportunity for Silicon Valley companies to expand into the Chinese market? So maybe either of you can take a crack at it. Professor Zhang, you go first. Yeah.
Yeah, I have been looking into these questions for several years, but I think the pandemic really just accelerate this process. So there are 3 phases of innovations in the history, and the first phase is about the mass production. Okay, so if anyone can do a good job in the mass production, then you will earn the market. So this is the first phase, and we have passed through that one. And the second phase is R&D based product design. So and use this product to develop the market. So to link the manufacturing and the market. So this is what we are doing now. So I think in this stage, China and US are almost in a similar level, but China has a weakness. The weakness is our fundamental creativity is not as strong. So the third phase is how to innovate originally, how to use the most fundamental science and technology to develop the product. So so we need more support from the top universities and top lab, at least from the perspective of China. So so I think the companies in Silicon Valley has a very strong opportunity over there. So they can link the research institute and the product design very strongly. And we can help these companies to do the mass production in China and to open the market in China. I think this is the, in whatever area, whatever in biotech, AI, battery, whatever, new energy, whatever. So if they can just link the top technology in the US Institute and the lab with, and then develop it as the product, then if you have the market in China. Yeah, this is. My opinion.
Michael?
Sure. I can talk this topic for endless. I've been working cross border, helping startups to scale up in China market. And then in 2017, we launched a accelerator program called Innovation Journey China, where not only source companies from New York, but also Silicon Valley and the European market who are in B2B tech into China market, because I truly believe that there's a big market that for B2B market in China to boom, as well as a lot of a digital transformation happening inside of China for traditional manufacturing business and traditional banking, as well as a lot of a traditional conglomerate in China. So we typically are sector agnostic, and we had amazing cohorts in the past. For example, I give you some example. And then one of the company we work with called Robotics, which is a Carnegie Mellon University-based IoT company, and then they are through us, and they connect with China Construction Communication Company, and then working on a pilot. And then the other company just launched a satellite with the Transporter One with a SpaceX a few days ago, called Hyper from Dutch, and then they're looking for market expansion opportunities in China as well. They're doing IoT connectivity stuff. So all I'm saying is we have some success, we have some of failures. What I sort of summarize or conclude from there are you need to have a right mentality and to go to China market. And some of them, no matter where the stage are, probably you're even in growth stage or even beyond, some of the times you need to build your products and services from scratch again to just meet the local market. And then really you have to spend time inside of China to learn what are the customer needs your products to solve the problem. And then may or may not be aligned with what's your original products. And so I think that's all some of the fundamental mentality and a culture difference that a lot of founders from the US and from the other part of the world trying to break into the China market. Of course, that annually provide a lot of investable opportunities for either corporations in China, but as well as the fund in China to be able to leverage that. But all in all, it's a building the right mentality and find the right access, find the right partners that can partner with you to do the commercial contracts and launching the business in China is super important for a lot of founders. So that's some of my feedbacks.
So it sounds like there's still plenty of opportunities despite everything crazy that's going on in the world. And as Professor John said, China's a huge market. So definitely consider going there. I think we can wrap up if it's good with everyone on the panel, and if everyone could, as I had requested, just do a really quick 30-second, 1-minute executive summary of what you think are the key opportunities for US innovation and Chinese investors, and also with a twist, since this is hosted by the universities. Do you have any advice on how the universities can get involved, or are you working with the universities right now? Maybe you could just share really, really briefly. Sorry, and I wanted to mention that Lee had to go, so he's on another call. But so maybe Olivia could go first. Executive summary and then university collaboration. I think you already work with them a lot, so
yeah,
that should be easy.
Well, I'm going to be really corny and really fast. I think follow your heart, because we're in a passion economy, we're in an attention economy, we have different incentive structures, and the most successful collaborations are now more mission driven that make money, right? And love working with students and new ideas. We back a lot of serial entrepreneurs, but there's also something to be said about students with no experience that are insanely smart, that work very fast, and both are very inspiring.
Michael?
Yeah, I would say YOLO. No, I'm joking. So don't gamble, don't speculate. And then my feedback is I really appreciate such opportunities that university are taking responsibility, connecting the dots together, and then creating this platform for students to learn from each other. We're for me, I also learn a lot from university students, and I'm currently working with a lot of universities in the labs. I'm glad that the X Lab is doing a lot of amazing things. I just doing my homework on a website. It's just amazing things that our university can take part of a play into this innovation game. And I think education is the key, right? So educating young people about what is the future, and then potentially explore the future with them together. And then not only from the capital side, but also from the resources from all the alumni that can combine together. I think that's the best of the things that university can provide for the students. And I appreciate the platform like we're here today. I think we're sharing some of the knowledges and experience, but also I think I learned a lot from other panelists as well. So I think it's also a learning perspective for me.
I definitely learned a lot. I don't know if Professor Zhang and Professor
Okay.
Cedar, maybe you guys can also have some closing remarks.
Okay, so yeah, the pandemic is a tragedy for the whole world, but everything has two
确
sides.
是一个灾难，但是事情还是有两面性的。产业的变革的确是在疫情期间加速了。 那如果我们去用这个自然界的一个比喻，比如说蓝鲸死了，它其实它的这个尸体可以去喂海洋中其他的这个鱼。其实我经常会把这个例子跟学生分享，希望能够去促进他们思考，去重新的改变世界。我觉得每个人都有巨大的机会。当然了，这个挑战也是存在的。这个教授。其实从今天的对话中，我学到了很多，听到了很多非常有意义的分享。在我看来，我们未来做投资的方式，其实肯定会发生改变。可能会和我们日常的工作、生活相关。像我自己的话，我之前也一直在思考，学生可以做什么样的项目，包括是不是能把数据和人工智能还有投资相结合。的确，我觉得是有一些启发和机遇的。从学校的角度来说，我们认为院校基本上是非常有深度的，它的学生本身的潜力是无穷的。我们希望能够获得的是和产业界的联系。我觉得也是呼吁这个产业界跟我们的学校有更多的合作，共建一些实验室啊，或者是研究项目。我们希望能够把不同领域的人带到一起，共同的去做一些尝试。因为我觉得不同背景的人聚集到一起，其实可以碰撞出很多新的火花。单纯的去想可能是很难实现的，更多的还是要交流去合作。我们希望有更
From that stems a lot of innovation.
I totally agree with that. The collision is, and then the magic, that's where it happens. We need chemical reactions, bringing different ingredients together. Okay, well, we're definitely out of time. We're 12 minutes over. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. Those of you in the US, it's almost dinner time. And those of you in China, again, thank you for taking your morning to come and hear this excellent panel. You can find the panelists. I'm sure you have the introduction materials highlighting who they are. And if there's any opportunities, I think you should feel free to reach out. Thank you again to the Satarja Center and CKGSB.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
I also just want to say thank you to CKGSB. You know, before you get a chance to say it, I you know, it's like in my last couple like words here, you know, just I think again, part of the mixing of different people is the fact that CKGSB has this incredible other part of the world network, and they have, you know, such great alumni, and they and I think the more that we can be doing mixing also, not just the industry side, but mixing geographically, we appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.